Once again enveloped by the smell of the market, I thought back to the man I had been when Kat had brought me here. How did it all go so wrong? Deep down, I knew the answer. I was just too scared to commit to my family. It was so much easier to care about something that didn't have to like you back. That wouldn't go away if you didn't want it to. For me, that was my job. But ironically, protecting myself like that only made it hurt so much worse. Now that Laura was out of my reach, the pain of being separated was only amplified by the knowledge that I had missed so many opportunities to be with her. The Korean Hotel. I didn't even need to look that up. It was directly next to the Grand Church at Korean Square, one of the most important houses of prayer for Saviants here on Gara. It probably would be crowded with believers and tourists tomorrow morning. No doubt it was the Liberator's next target. The rush of making progress in the case only lasted a few moments until I realized that now I had to make a tough decision. If I told Zora about the target, I couldn't tell the CDI, and vice versa. felt like shit for letting Zora and her accomplices intercept the attack. There were so many ways this could go wrong. I didn't want them to take more, or worse yet, somehow miss him and let the attack happen. Don't get me wrong, I didn't regret telling Zora what I knew to protect Laura, but endangering the lives of innocent people wasn't an acceptable trade-off. I couldn't tell the CDI, or even call in an anonymous tip with the police, because the chance was too high that Zora would suspect me. There was no other way. If I wanted to make sure things didn't go south, I had to go to the church myself. I left in the middle of the night, hoping it wasn't already too late. When I came to, my head and my shoulder hurt, and I was cold. I remember feeling relief when I realized I was still in the church and not tied up in the back of a van. Everybody else was gone without a trace, except for the bomb. I approached it carefully, but quickly realized it was disabled, or had never been fully assembled in the first place. I knelt down to examine the explosives, looking for clues pointing me to their origin. If Young had been there, she could have run a full analysis. Lucky for me, the explosives were clearly identifiable from their shape and labeling alone. These were Cineon sticks, used in chamber blasting. Nobody had access to those outside of the mining industry. I stepped back, satisfied for a moment. Then the rest of reality came crashing down on me. What would Zora's boss do when he heard that I was here? What were they planning on doing with more? And fuck, what about the guard? I hadn't seen much through the window in the attic, but it had looked like one of Zora's guys had fired at him. My heart started racing while I quietly went back down the stairs. You may be asking yourself how I remained functional throughout all of this. How I didn't just collapse under the pressure and the looming prospect of losing my daughter forever. I think the truth is that over the years, I had gotten really good at tuning out the voice that always tormented me, that had always told me horrible shit. This was just adding to it. More to repress, more bubbling beneath the surface. Maybe if it had gone on for long enough, I would have imploded sooner or later. After I woke up, I stared at the ceiling for a while. I resisted the urge to look for news about a dead guard. Somebody had certainly found him by now. It was my fault for letting Zora's people go to the church. His death was on me. Fuck. I needed to do something about that. But later. Today would be a deciding day. Zora's words rang in my head. 7 o'clock tonight. I had to do what they asked of me, but I wasn't sure where the data they wanted was stored. I was running out of time. I sat up and made a decision. The sheet on the Liberators. I needed to complete it now. I had a feeling that all the puzzle pieces were there. If I found out who was in charge of the Liberators, I might finally understand what the data was all about and where to look for it. Or maybe I could force them to pay Zora's boss so he'd let Laura go. Dyson. All the signs pointed towards him and his company. I didn't feel like I had the full picture just yet, but some aspects finally made sense to me. None of the people we had encountered seemed to support what the Liberators claimed to stand for. This wasn't a Garian terror group at all. It was Drovians, Savians, hired guns, and business people, all working for one man's false flag operation. What was he trying to accomplish? Stir up enough trouble to force the solar system into a war? I had talked to Dyson the morning after Banny's death. He was still in Gara, hiding in plain sight, and I still had his number. I considered my options. We needed to arrest him. But maybe we could have a chat first. Just the two of us. Once the CDI had him, he wouldn't be able to talk freely. I took out my cell and tapped his face in my contacts. My heart was pounding. Would Dyson really come, or did I spook him? Did he suspect I was onto him? It would be a while until I found out, so I sat down and took a deep breath. At least I had a little time to think about what to say to him if he showed up. I was supposed to write a report on my findings in the Liberator's case, but I wasn't able to concentrate for even a second. First, I needed to wait for my colleagues to go home to be alone with Saito. He always worked late. But then what? What if he refused to help me? The idea of having to force him was devastating. He was my friend, after all. When I finally managed not to think about it anymore, a much more dire thought crept up on me. Laura might die tonight. And if she did, it would be my fault. inserted the stick into my cell and opened up the folder. My heart was pounding. For a moment, it looked like the data wouldn't load, but then the files started appearing on the screen. Dozens, maybe hundreds of documents, messages, pictures, and videos. They were decades old. Most of them dated 1799 or 1800. Their confidentiality level was one I'd never seen before. This was the type of data the Garian network would instantly pick up and trace, both to its receiver and back to its sender. It made sense to physically hand-deliver it if one wished to remain anonymous. I didn't know where to begin, so I opened up the very first file in the list, the oldest one, with shaking hands. It was a document sent from someone at the Department of Commerce to the director of the CDI at the time, Emilia Thorne, now Attorney General in charge of the Justice Department. My eyes widened as I skimmed over the paragraphs. When I was done reading the letter, I checked the time. 20 more minutes. I sat down and opened up the second one, then the third. As the conversation went on, a plan was hatched between a handful of politicians, special interest groups from the private sector, and high-ranking members of the CDI. I didn't recognize most of the names. Some might have been pseudonyms. I stopped looking at the files halfway through and let my head sink onto the backrest. Even though they had used very careful language at first, the goal and purpose of the operation were abundantly clear. The failure of Sector 2 hadn't been an accident. Garians had plotted and engineered it to gain sole access to Drovia's resources, and given its strategic importance at the time, ultimately retained supremacy over the solar system. My head was spinning while I tried to figure out what all of it meant for the present, and for me. I had long doubted the integrity of the CDI. Was it still rotten to the core, or had things changed? I didn't know about any ongoing operations that were breaching interplanetary law, but then most agents at the time of the Sector 2 incident hadn't known either, and some of the things I did know about, I didn't want to think about them too much. Now what? On the one hand, the public had a right to know. The culprits had to be found and brought to justice. Reparations had to be paid to the affected families and businesses. On the other hand, if the truth came out, the liberators would win. Savient extremists might be emboldened enough to take control of the colony and declare independence. If that happened, Gara would send its ships, and New Joran might send theirs to back up their Savient brethren, and to finally gain access to the planet's Telanium, of course, if their side won. Hundreds might die, thousands even. Time was running out. I tapped the contact of a journalist I had met a while back. I still hadn't made a decision when I heard the dial tone. The data would probably go through if I decided to send it, but there was no way in hell it wouldn't be traced back to me. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears that I almost didn't hear the voice on the other end. the final corridor, we passed by a large surgery room. I didn't think about it at the time, but that must have been where they had given Zora her new face and implanted Boyd's fake ID. The only thing I could think about was whether they'd moved Laura or done something to her the moment they'd heard us coming. And that's it. The most tumultuous days of my life, and possibly in Garian history. Abbot Dyson is back on Drovia, and I seem to be the only person outside of the conspiracy who knows about his involvement in the terror attacks. So far, he seems to be staying true to his word and is discontinuing the Liberators. I wonder which one of us looks over their shoulder more often these days. Even though Dyson and Cox each lost a lot in the Sector 2 incident, I don't believe their actions were really driven by a righteous thirst for revenge. Almost all the people who have suffered and might still suffer from their actions had nothing to do with Gara's past crimes. Ultimately, Dyson had tried to start an interplanetary war in hopes of increasing his profit margins, and he might still succeed in it. I still have the incriminating data hidden away somewhere, but I'm not going to touch it anytime soon. Gara's involvement in the Sector 2 incident becoming a matter of public record would be exactly the spark needed to plunge the solar system into war. If the colony decided to declare independence, Gara would send their ships, and New Joran might step up to defend Drovia. Thousands of lives would be lost, and for what? To right the wrongs of a 40-year-old crime? As much as I want to see the culprits behind bars, sometimes it's better to hide the truth. It's strange knowing that parts of the CDI under Amelia Thorne's leadership were involved in the sabotage. Seeing her act as Attorney General and leader of the Department of Justice every day, I wonder what she's involved in nowadays. But I can't out her without telling the whole truth, so I stay quiet. The CDI has suspended me without pay until further notice, and I might face criminal charges. The back door in the CDI database that Zora had installed from my cell was traced back to me, but my superiors seemed to understand that I hadn't had much of a choice at the time. I had to come clean about the church, in part because I felt bad, and in part because I wanted to get ahead of it. Lara is free again and seems to be doing okay, but I wonder every day about the scars this experience has left behind. Even though I know I'm not directly to blame, I will never forgive myself for inadvertently dragging her into all this. As for me, I am free again, as free as I was before, but my life is forever changed. Catherine and I are dating again, however crazy that sounds. Things are so different now. The world is so different that maybe something good can come of it again. finally, Zora. There was a moment when I thought she might have changed. I saw hesitation in her eyes, or maybe it was all in my head. Despite everything she had done, her death upset me. It took the CDI a while to find out anything about her previous life. Turns out her name used to be Elizabeth Davis. She and her friend Boyd had been picked up by the mercenaries as teenagers on the run. Both of them came from affluent Garian families, and both had been reported missing, presumed dead. When they burned her body, Zora's parents were the only ones there besides me. As I stared into the flames, I wondered what her life could have been.
Late in the evening, the lights are still there, ever unchanging, they shine unaware. The sea is above me, the sea